Now that you have color-coded your reference photos, the bird, the butterfly, the hand, and at this point you should also have the flower, the spider, and the leaf color-coded as well. Now you're going to choose one of those that you want to use for your repeat pattern design, and you're going to do two different versions of it. You can either use the technique that we have learned and practiced of drawing the negative space, which would be the orange shapes that you see, or drawing the positive space, which is the blue shapes that you see. Most people are used to drawing the positive space, but if you felt that drawing the negative space actually helped you and gave you a more realistic copy of the shapes, then you are welcome to use that. Go ahead and choose which of the little squares you want to use, and then it might be a little bit easier if we just go ahead and fold it down so that you can only see that one square, and that'll make it a little bit easier. I'm going to choose to use this one. So I'm just going to fold my paper pretty quickly, pretty crudely, so that all I can see is the bird. That'll kind of help keep me from getting confused. And now I'm ready to start transferring the shapes that I see here onto my four square pattern. Now when you get this, you might say, Miss Specht, you must have messed up because obviously these squares are bigger than this square. But I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose because I didn't want you guys just tracing the shapes you see here. This is practice, and this is a test of how well you can redraw the shapes that you see here without having to trace them. On your four square pattern paper, I want you to write two words before you actually begin drawing. On one side of the paper, I want you to write the word reflection. A reflection is one type of pattern that you can create. You guys have learned about this in Miss Kilcullen's class. So the pattern that I should see here should show reflection. On the other side of the paper, you've got another four square pattern. And at the bottom of this paper, I want you to write the word rotation. Once again, you should have learned how to do this in Miss Kilcullen's class, and that is the type of pattern that I want to see here. I'm going to start with the rotation side. That side is a little bit easier. One square at a time. We're only going to do four squares, so I'm going to start one square at a time and draw. For me, I'm going to draw the negative space, the orange shapes, one at a time. Even if you choose to draw the positive space instead, if that's more comfortable to you, you still need to make sure that anywhere the blue shapes, the positive space, touches the edges of the box, your shape is that big too. So the wing touches at the top of the box, the tail feathers touch the left side, the other wing touches the bottom, the beak touches the side, the right side. So it has to go all the way to the edges, just like it does on your original paper. You can't just draw a really tiny little larkspur right here in the middle and call it a day. It has to go to the edges so that our pattern will look pretty cool when we're done. So let me go ahead and get started on this. When we were in class, we learned, and working on the one with the hand, we learned about how you can kind of measure to make sure that you get the right placement of each one of the shapes. Remember that the first couple of marks you make may not be the best. You may have to go back and refine them. But since we are doing a four square pattern, that means that you are going to have to redraw whichever one it is that you choose to draw. You're going to have to redraw it at least 4 times. So more than likely they won't all be exactly the same, but the more times that you draw it, the better you're going to get. And one final shape, this one down here at the bottom, that forms the underside of the bird and the wing. And the purpose of this whole exercise and this whole project is that it won't necessarily, when you're all done and when you've colored it in, you won't necessarily be able to tell that it started out as a picture of a bird or a hand or a flower. It's just going to become these big, interesting shapes. Even though my lines are kind of messy, as long as they're there, I'm happy with that. Alright, so I've got my first square done. Now I'm ready to do the second one. If I were to draw the same shape exactly the same again, that would just be a translation. But I don't want to see a translation. I want to see something a little different. So I'm going to take my piece of paper, the one that actually has the drawing on it, and I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. I'm going to do that rotation 90 degrees. And now I'm still drawing the same shapes. Those four shapes are exactly the same. They're just turned. So it definitely stretches your mind a little bit. It makes you think about what you're actually drawing, what the shape is. After you guys are done drawing your patterns and you have finished them, I'm going to look through. I'm going to find the ones that I feel are the best in the class, that I can really tell the student took their time, was really trying their hardest to make it look exactly like the shape in the picture, really making sure that they went back and refined those lines if it wasn't exactly the same as it should have been, if things were a little bit bigger than they should have been, or a little bit smaller. And those that I choose are going to have the opportunity to recreate their pattern on a larger scale, larger piece of paper, and I'm going to allow them to paint it with watercolors. And those patterns will go in the big art show that we're going to have on May 9th. Okay, so now I've got the same shape, but I have drawn it twice now. Once the way that it was originally printed, I've rotated it once, now I'm ready to do the last two. I'm just going to keep on rotating my paper. I'm going to rotate it again, another 90 degrees, and redraw it. Now one thing you'll notice that I haven't done is I haven't really drawn this part of each shape, because that's already created by my dotted line. So don't let that fool you, don't let that throw you off. I am still considering that, but that line is pretty much already there for me. If I wanted to draw this entire shape, I would just go ahead and draw over my dotted lines, but eventually I would want you to erase those lines anyway, so since I've done this before and have been doing this for a while, I'm just going to leave them where they are. Alright, two more shapes, this one and this one. Let me refine this a little bit more, that's not so dramatic. Drawing the negative space also makes you no longer think about it as, oh, that's the head, that's the beak, that's the wing. You're really just trying to think of the shapes themselves and trying to figure out how you can recreate those shapes. After you've drawn it 4 times, you'll look back and you'll see which one actually looks the closest to it. Hopefully, the last one or the last couple are probably going to be the best looking ones because you've gotten the practice then. You've had a little bit more time to refine them. But it is interesting to see how they're all 4 just a little bit different from each other and how they can all be some better and some a little bit worse. Okay, so I started out like this. I turned it to the right 90 degrees, turned it to the right again 90 degrees, so one more rotation, 90 degrees, and this is the direction that my bird's going to be facing when I draw it right over here. Hopefully with some of these, once you finish, you'll be able to see some connections, that some parts of the bird are connecting to other parts of the bird in another square. Didn't quite happen on mine. I was hoping that the wing right here would connect to the beak on this bottom one, but that didn't happen for me. That's alright though. I think it'll still be a pretty interesting pattern. And that's why I'm asking you guys to do 2 different patterns. To do one that shows reflection and one that shows rotation. That way maybe one of them will have a little bit more of a connection. My reflection one ought to. Alright, my last little shape right here. Even though it seems like this is the simplest one, this is the one that always seems to look pretty funky to me. I don't know why. I think maybe I made this tail feather a little too big. Let me erase some of those lines that were mess-ups. Alright, so now I've got all 4 of them drawn. I've got my rotation. Now I'm ready to flip over and try my reflection. I'm not going to make you watch me the entire time do the entire reflection, but I do want to show you how you're going to get that reflection. Obviously, on your piece of paper, I noted that one side is the front and the other side is the back. I have already traced each one of these squares for you in a reflection format. The back side is a perfect mirror image of the shapes that you see on the front. So since I know that I'm going to use the bird, I'm going to go ahead and use my orange crayon just to help me with seeing the shapes, because that color contrast really helps me with seeing the actual shapes that I'm drawing. To color in my negative space. And then I'll go ahead and use my blue crayon to color in the positive space so I can see the contrast of the orange and the blue. Alright. Oh, left off a little bit. Okay. So now let me go back to this. I'm going to do the same thing again for my positive space, or for my first square. Draw the same exact format and direction that it was on the other side of the paper. Okay. Now I've got the bottom part of the wing. Now I've got this little corner. And then my final shape up here. Okay, got that drawn in. Now I'm ready to do a reflection on this side. So I have to open my paper up and I have to turn over to the back side. And that is what my reflection should look like. And this is where, like I said, it's going to actually match up. The two beaks is going to look like the birds are kind of kissing, just because of the one that I chose, and because when you have a mirror image, whatever the objects are, whether they're birds, leaves, whatever it is, they're going to look like they're kind of touching each other, kind of facing each other. And that can look pretty cool. Alright, our back shape. Alright, that one's done. One more little shape down here. Alright, and that side's done. Like I said, if you need to draw these lines in the middle and along the bottom to kind of help you get that shape, that's fine, but eventually I do want you to erase them before we actually start coloring everything in. Alright, so I've got my top two done. Now I would just need to do either the same thing on the bottom. Once again, just draw another bird this way and another bird that way, or if you wanted to, you could also do a reflection this way, so that it's not only reflecting from left to right, it's also reflecting from top to bottom. Draw it to where the bird looks like it's upside down, and that way these two wings will kind of match up with each other. And then I could flip back over to the front of my paper and do another reflection here, so that these two wings are matching up with each other. This bird's upside down, and those beaks will be touching each other again. Your choice, but remember to do a reflection on one side of your paper, rotation on the other. Then I'll give you directions on actually adding color.